In the thick of the George Floyd protests that recently grounded a number of cities across the United States, journalist Shannon Lanier granted an interview to the Smithsonian publication during which he called for the removal of all statues and symbols representing everyone that fought on the side of the Confederate forces during the American Civil War. About 3 years ago, he raised the same issue in an interview with CNN. Let's take a listen and come back for more.
It needs some form of documentation. He can look at the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, which Jefferson wrote. It did include freeing slaves, but that was one of the largest debates during that time, whether it was going to stay in or stay out. Of course, it was taken out of the Declaration of Independence, but if he needed some documentation, he has it. And I agree with you that this is an opportunity for the country to step forward and get rid of some of those sites and those statues. I don't think they should be destroyed. I think they should be put in historical places like a museum where you can add context to who they are and the whole story, instead of just them being praised and held for the horrible acts that they did.
You know, I learned that I was in Charlottesville when this debate over Sally Hemings reached a point where the Thomas Jefferson Foundation changed its approach to it. For decades, they denied the possibility that Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson had children. But thanks to DNA evidence, they couldn't deny it any longer. Now, they could have been bitter enders. They could have said, I don't have 100% certainty. But they decided that they understood that history evolves. So they changed not just their public statements, but their exhibits. And they welcomed Shannon's family. What I'm adding it.
Shannon Lanier also called on the removal of all statues erected in honor of Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, who is his sixth great-grandfather. Jefferson was a slave owner who had 6 children. Through Sally Hemings, a slave girl, is Shannon Lanier's sixth great-grandmother. But one of the American founding fathers, a man who authored the Declaration of Independence created by the Virginia Statutes for Religious Freedom, made the Louisiana Purchase and participated in founding of the Library of Congress and the University of Virginia, stands on the wrong side of history, according to his grandson to the 6th generation, who now joins us from the United States to discuss all these issues, especially against the backdrop of racial tensions in this country. Shannon Lanier is a television reporter, actor, as well as an author. Welcome to the show, Shannon. It's a joy having you here.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Real quickly, I just, want to understand this better. And, because a lot of narratives have been written about this. Tundu and I and somebody else, they was talking about a movie. I'm sure you've seen the movie called Jefferson in Paris. The movie was released in 1995. And the movie talked about, Thomas Jefferson having a love relationship with Sally Hemings. They were in love. That was what the movie portrayed. So there's been a lot of narrative as regards to it, even in the media. What's your take on this?
Well, a lot of people would love to see it as a love relationship because it lasted 38 years, and that's a lot easier for a lot of people to imagine than a 38-year rape or a president taking advantage of someone. But, I was not there. I don't know what their relationship was at the time, and neither does anyone else because we can only speculate what it was. But either way, she was a slave, an enslaved woman. She was his property, so he could do what he wanted with her whenever he wanted just because he owned her. She was property at the time. So we don't know what the relationship may have evolved into or what it turned into. I think that there may have been maybe some Stockholm syndrome there. I mean, she was still a young girl at the time, so he was a very powerful and influential man. So I could see how, he could have certain types of enticing things and aspects about him, especially he was a slave owner. So, it's unfortunate we don't know more about their relationship, but hopefully one day we will begin to learn more about that. But I try to stay away from the full romanticized version of the story. I mean, that was a Hollywood movie, and sometimes Hollywood takes its liberties.
Well, Shannon, there's something I would like you to help us clarify. You want monuments pulled down. But does the removal of statues and monuments of persons connected with racism and slavery, does it erase memory and history? Is it better if those same monuments are kept away from a public display, maybe in museums?
I'm glad you allowed me to clarify that. I believe that there should be an opportunity to take down the statues from public arenas, public places, public squares, and different things where people are. But I don't think that they should be taken down from everywhere and erased from history. I think that there's an opportunity for people to learn more of the full story about these monuments, more of the full story. Right now, history is being erased because they're not telling the full story of these people. They're just putting up these huge statues for these people as icons and saying, oh, okay, here, these are great people that did great things. They're not saying the full story of who they were as slave owners, as who they were as people who believed certain things that may not be in line with what they said in the writings that they put out. Jefferson wrote, all men are created equal. When he wrote those words, they did not include people of color. They did not include women. They did not include a lot of people that now can be seen as represented in those words. Now we're trying to live out those words to include all people. But when he wrote it, it did not include those people. It's time that we teach the full history of America and not select what we want to teach and not just pick the good things that someone did and just leave out all the bad things. Let's tell this full story and let's take down these statues that are offensive to people, that are in public arenas and public places. And I believe they should be put in museums and libraries and places where we will have an opportunity to put some context to the content and tell the full story of who this person was.
Thank you for that. Now, for our viewers, I'd like to just give some context. We're talking about Thomas Jefferson, and our equivalents here are people like Nnamdi Azikiwe, Obafemi Awolowo, Ahmadu Bello, our founding fathers that negotiated Nigeria's independence with the British. So what you're suggesting here is quite seismic, given the stature of your ancestor. But I wanted to ask you that some people are drawing a distinction. Some agree that Confederate statues are one thing, but a statue of a founding father is quite another, that the Confederate statues celebrate people who rebelled against the United States and tried to destroy it. But your ancestor is somebody who built the United States so that he should be untouchable. And apart from those monuments, he's also on legal tender. His face, even his home, is on currency. What do you think should happen with currency?
I think that's a good distinction that, he was not a Confederate leader. He helped build this country. The Confederates helped tear down this country. But the reality of it is he also helped build this country on the backs of enslaved people. Were giving free labor. They gave their blood, their sweat, and their tears to build this country, to lift up this country, to make it the foundation of what it is now. Why not recognize some of them? Why not give them more credit for making it possible for Jefferson to have the time to write the Declaration of Independence, the time to make the Louisiana Purchase? Those things would not be possible if he did not have free laborers working over his property and making it so he had a comfortable life and he could relax and put his feet up. They weren't putting their feet up. So I believe that, we have to look at the whole person, and he was a slave owner. For many years, I gave Jefferson a pass because he was a founding father. But, we have to start holding people accountable for what they did and the entirety of that person, and not just say, okay, we're going to pick and choose because he was a good guy, so he should be allowed to get a statue, because we're not celebrating the bad things he did. We're celebrating the good things he did. Well, in that case, Harvey Weinstein's family could put up a statue and say, we're celebrating him as a groundbreaking Hollywood producer, filmmaker, and greenlighter of movies and films and different things like that. We're not celebrating the fact that he is accused of raping several people. And I always try to put it in perspective for some people and say, imagine you or your most loved one in your family, who you love the most, was killed, raped, taken advantage of by someone, and then comes someone else and says, we're going to put a statue of that person who did those horrible things to your family members. We're going to put that statue up in your yard and on your public square, so you have to pass that statue every day when you go to work. You're probably not going to want that statue up. Although that person did some great things, they also did some horrible things, and we have to recognize who someone is in their entirety. I think that there should be statues up of Jefferson in public and not public arenas like museums, like libraries, where we can study who he was, where we can learn that he was a slave owner, that he owned 600 slaves, that 6,000 slaves helped build UVA, that he still did these great things for this country, but he was also a flawed man. We like to put people up on this pedestal to see them as gods, as icons, but they were just human. They were just people. We have to recognize who they were in their entirety and tell the full story. That's what's being left out. Fine, if people want to put him up in, a library at a school or a facility, a museum, and tell the full story, that's great. We get to learn more about him. I think that makes him a more realistic human being, that we can see the full story of who he was. But we can't negate the fact that he owned slaves, that these people had voices, that these people helped him become who he was, that the foundation of this country was built on the backs of slaves and of people who died for this country. And it wasn't just all about Jefferson.
Right. I've got two questions very quickly. Number one is about your picture at the Smithsonian with Jefferson. Goodness me, some good resemblance there.
It's such a powerful picture.
It's such a powerful picture. And I also want to ask, it's quite sad that America fought a civil war because of slaves, the rights of slaves. And afterwards, under the President Wilson's ground, there was a reconstruction, and you thought that would have brought, succor and stability to the black man's plight in America. It's shocking. Why has that not happened yet?
I think so many people are comfortable with the past. They're comfortable with, unfortunately, you have certain people promoting propaganda of Make America Great Again. People want to go back to those days when, certain people were in power and certain people could do what they wanted to do. We're just now getting to a reckoning of where we're able to, hold people accountable for their past actions, to make people hear what people have been saying for years about the inequality of people in the black community especially. And we're getting to a point where maybe we will have that change, or maybe we will be able to change some laws and to end some of the police brutality that exists right now, that we'll be able to have some more equality and fairness in our education system, in our prison system, in our court system. But, we have to keep fighting for that, and we have to keep calling for change. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing happening now in America, is people are calling for that change. And it's not just black people, that it's people of all races, that it's the equality, the inequality that's happening in our country, and they're tired of it. They want more fairness. They want more equality for all people. And I think we're getting to that point. Hopefully it will continue, and people will continue fighting for justice.
The picture, very powerful picture it was.
Oh, yeah.
What's the sense?
So the picture was done several months ago, and Drew Gardner came here from London and created this picture, and it just is an opportunity for people to see how strong genes can be. I never thought I looked like Jefferson until this.
You really do.
This came out. Well, you should go. I just posted something on my Instagram page at Mr. Shannon Lanier, and it morphs both of our pictures together in one, and you can really see how close we are when you see us morph together as one and taken back. You can see that on my Instagram page at Mr. Shannon Lanier, and that is even more shocking. I'm like, what? So that was amazing for me to see, and I also tell more about my story on that page as well. But just so people can get a sense of, yeah, this was a long time ago, but the genes are still strong. And the fact that my family descends from Jefferson is just an example of many families that descend from slavery. This is what this country has become. This is what has happened because of slavery and because of the slave owners taking advantage of their enslaved people, that this world is now a more diverse world. And I say that Jefferson helped create this country in more ways than one, not only the foundation of this country, but also the people of this country, because now we are a more diverse people. And if we can see that we are sort of all one family, then maybe we can put some of the differences behind us that exist because of color. Because someone may be hating me because I have black blood running through my veins, but if they did a little research in their family, they may find out that they have the same blood running through their veins. So that's one of the reasons I think racism discrimination is stupid, because if you even take it back, we're all descendants of Adam and Eve, so we're all one family regardless.
Well, Shannon, I see that in the portrait with Drew Gardner, you were not wearing a wig. Was that an act of protest or a personal choice? And then, of course... Okay, please go ahead.
They asked me to wear the wig, and I said, absolutely not. I did not want to make it comical. I didn't want someone to, even think I was trying to portray one thing. I am not trying to be Jefferson, and I do not celebrate the way he and Sally had children, but I am here because of it. I'm a representation of that family. I am a representation of the DNA that is in my blood. So regardless if you can't pick family. So regardless if I love it or hate it, the fact is I'm here because of it. And so I'm just trying to be me and represent, I guess, a holding of a mirror up to America to show them this is what has happened to our country. I am just a result of it, as are many other people that have been touched by slavery. So I did not want to wear the wig because I'm me. I'm not Jefferson. And I did want to stand for just showing the difference of who I have become through that relationship that they had.
And I was going to ask you, I mean, this conversation about change, reconciliation, healing has been going on forever. Do you think we'll ever get to a point when we will have a just and fair world where we can comfortably talk about equality?
Honestly, no. I think we can get closer to that. But even if everyone looked exactly the same, people will find something to say, oh, well, your hair is short. Well, my hair is long. And then you have people that discriminate against people because their hair is short and their hair is long. So people are always going to find some type of difference between another person to hold someone down, because that is, the structure of human beings. We like to find ways that we can be higher than others and lower than others. I mean, I think we will come to a time where it is easier, where people are more accepted. We're not dealing with the same issues that we were dealing with in 1950 like we're dealing with today. But I think we will come to a place where people will just find different things to discriminate against people. But hopefully that won't be skin color.
Fingers crossed, a post-racial world is a possibility at some point. But there's been a lot of momentum lately. I mean, none of these calls are new. But after the murder of George Floyd, it has really hit critical mass. But what do you say to those who criticize calls for removing monuments and what have you as a distraction, and say the focus should be on the killing of black people by police and not issues like this or defunding the police and the other things that are springing up? Or do you think it's best to seize the moment while you have it and make all the change that you possibly can?
Yeah, I agree with making all the changes you possibly can. I don't see it as a distraction. I see it as a compliment to the fight, a compliment to these things need to change. Let's change them while people are listening, because for so many years people have not been listening. So yes, I think we need to have some type of reform in the police department where they are trained differently, where they are taught to not see people as guilty until proven innocent. They are innocent until proven guilty. There's a very big difference there. And I also believe that the statues thing is just another way that people feel oppressed, another way that people are looked down upon, because a lot of these statues, especially of the Confederate, were put in place to remind people that they are less than, to remind people that they are not full humans, to remind people that they will never be, and they have to be put in their place and looked down upon. So I believe this is an opportunity to get rid of a lot of things that exist right now because people are listening. It doesn't stop with just police brutality. It doesn't stop with just, the statues. It goes on to having the systemic racism that has existed in our country for years. It goes on to equaling the playing field for people to get an equal education, to have books in schools, to have technology in schools and lower income communities where we have opportunities to have the same education, to have the same health care, to have all of these things that have been held back for so long. This is a time that we seize all of those opportunities. And just because they're happening at the same time doesn't mean they have to be a distraction. They can be a complement to the fight just as easily.
Well, thank you very much, Shannon Lanier, for joining us on the morning show. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Take care. Thanks, Arise. You guys continue to do a great operation.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
Well, quite a great conversation there.
It really was.
And I think that what he has done is quite courageous to say, look, I'm a member of the Jefferson family. He's my great-great-great-grandfather. But I think that for the fact that he owned slaves, 600 slaves Thomas Jefferson had, then, of course, he doesn't deserve to have his statue out there on display anywhere in the United States. And in the article he wrote, he said, look, Hitler, everybody knows Hitler, but nobody will put Hitler's statue anywhere in the whole of Germany, because the Germans themselves, the people themselves know that that was a dark spot in their history. But of course, Jefferson is not Hitler. I mean, he did a lot. When you were introducing the subject, you mentioned the Louisiana Purchase, which expanded, the American territory. He was also one of the very few former presidents of the United States to set up a university. He's regarded as the father of the University of Virginia. And then he wrote the most part of the 1776 Declaration of Independence. But just because he was a slave owner, the history has come back, centuries after, and his own great-grandson is saying for, amassing wealth on the back of the labor or sweat of other people, then he doesn't deserve his regard. I think that's interesting.
And I think the narrative here is do good, because the evil you do will taint you. It will come back to you. And no matter how much you've tried to polish your legacy over the years, like they have done with Thomas Jefferson, the fact that he has done something very heinous. And I'm sorry to burst your bubbles, I will compare him with Hitler. I will compare him with Hitler.
Wow.
You know why I will compare him with Hitler? What Hitler did, was mass assault on the world, was sort of segregation, because Hitler said there were people that were special races called Aryan race. And almost the same, too. Why would you own slaves in the first place? Why would you allow other people not be fairly treated? Why would you make them second-class citizens? Why would you pull them down? Evil is evil anywhere in the world. So I'll gladly compare him with Hitler. And I think I'll also continue with that narrative by saying the way we can't get Mein Kampf, you can't go to a bookstore in Germany to get Mein Kampf to read. That's the way we shouldn't have those statues on the streets. Have them in museums where we can, get to read about them. But we should have the full rounded side of the story. But the part that hurts me the most, I think it was Metternich that said, history is not really written by those that perform the historic acts. So history is written by so many people, and there are different variations to it. But we should have the wholesomeness of history. Why? Because people deserve to know the truth.
I was reading the letter Thomas Jefferson wrote about the separation of church and state, and just thought, what a brilliant mind he has. But this man, with his brilliant mind, was raping a 14-year-old. Sally Hemings was 14 years old. So it's extremely sinister. And I agree with you. Thomas Jefferson did not have expansionist ideas like Hitler had, but he did have racist ideas, exactly like Hitler, with the Untermensch and the Aryan. Yes,
that's
so
exactly.
I would compare. I haven't finished.
Yeah.
It's exactly like trying to walk down a road in Berlin and you see a statue of Goebbels and Heinrich Himmler and all those people. They do not do that. There's a shame in their attitude towards the Nazi atrocities. But with the Confederate statues everywhere, as Shannon rightly said, it's deliberate. They were put up to remind people, this is your place. You are less than the rest of us. It's extremely sinister.
Yeah, I'm all for condemning slavery or racism or anti-Semitism. And, although in the case of slavery, sometimes I always call up the other side of it, the footnote, the role played by Africans, our own ancestors also, in the slave trade. So it's not as if it's a black versus white
I'll tell you
heritage.
why it is, though. I'll tell you why it is. I'll tell you why it is. Our ancestors cannot be exonerated, but let's just put them to one side for a second. Slavery has been a part of human behavior since the beginning of time. Man has enslaved his neighbor. You go to war, you capture people, and you grab them, and that's it. But the transatlantic slave trade was the first time that it was married to race, where we black people became property. We did not do that before. With slavery, if I raided, as an Egba woman, if I raided Ijebu or what have you, and grabbed a few people, their children did not automatically become my slaves either. And their identity was not stripped from them the way black slaves were with the transatlantic. You were not even allowed to bear your name. You are not allowed to worship your gods. They were dehumanized in a way that has never been done. So our ancestors may not have been able to imagine or conceive of the level of evil that they were condemning people to because they did not practice that.
Well, they were complicit. We're saying the same.
Yes, but then they might not have known the extent. Okay, if I'm really good to my domestic stuff, which I am, and I recommend you one of them, and I send one of them to your house, if you decide to beat her and mistreat her, I would not know that you would do that, but I don't do that.
Dr.
I know. I quickly want to make an instance.
5 minutes.
There was slavery to the Middle East from Africa even before the transatlantic slave trade.
For longer.
And those people had the right to grow to the top echelons of society. In fact, there was an Ethiopian slave that became a leader of a region in India. At some point, I forget his name now.
The transatlantic slave trade was particularly evil. Yes, it was different.
And remember what Hitler did to Jesse Owens.
We've got to go now.
Yeah.
That's all on this edition of The Morning Show.